All right, gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. So we were talking yesterday about a case where a person who's an employee in a company, oh, sorry, thanks. Person who's an employee in a company, just share the screen, left the checks out on the table. Ganovim came and they stole the checks. Is this fellow liable? And the argument that he shouldn't be liable is because a check is different from cash. Check does not have, is really an IOU, a promissory note. And therefore, just like real estate is precluded from liability, according to the language of the Torah, so too are shtaros, are things that represent value, but of themselves do not have intrinsic value. So we were in the middle of the footnote yesterday. What did we say? So he says, oh, we were talking about paper cash. That was what we left off in the footnote. Does paper cash have intrinsic value, or do we treat it like a check? So he brings from the Chassam Sofer and the Chazon Ish that paper cash or plastic cash has the same status as gold and silver, and therefore they have intrinsic value. And that was the last thing we saw, is that there v'yesh omrim she'efshar afilu lekayem b'shtarot kesef mitzvahs pidyon haben, that it is possible to fulfill the mitzvah of pidyon haben, where you're supposed to give 5 shekels to the Kohen. You can do that with cash. Kaven to din kesef lahem lechol davar vavi kugufan mamon mamish, because they have the status of cash, even though it's just a piece of paper, but nevertheless, that's the legal tender of where you live, and therefore it could be used as a legitimate form of kesef. Amnam, ra'inu b'sefer pischei Choshen shekatav, de'afal pi sherov ha'achronim katvu sheshtaros shalanu dinam kesef. He says, however, I noticed that Rav Bloy writes that even though most achronim say that cash has the status of kesef, Mikol makom b'shut imre yosher kosav shehamuchsak yacholiton kimli kedas haposkim shedinam kishtaros ve'in b'hem dinei shmira ayin sham. He says, but what would happen in a similar case if the employee loses a bundle of cash, or leaves a pile of cash in an envelope on his desk, doesn't leave his door locked? People break in and steal the cash. What if the shomer says, I paskin like those poskim who say that cash does not have the status of kesef, meaning because it's paper money and it's just a representation of gold and silver, but it itself is not gold and silver. V'chein ra'inu b'shut har tzvi shehevi meshut oneg yamtiv shedaito sheshtaros kesef dinam kishtaros shen guf and mama. There is also such an opinion in the har tzvi and the oneg yantiv, that the argument is that paper money does not have the same status as gold and silver. V'chein b'milva Hashem kasav kain b'shem oneg yantiv anal b'shut beis shlomo b'sefer machnei chayim sheshtarot niyar shalanu nechshavim kishtari chov shen gufan mama. He quotes others who hold the same thing. V'lachein nira shegadol koach hamuchsak liton kimli kahani poskim shu padron me'achrayas. And therefore, obviously you would not lechatchila want to do anything of a halachic nature that requires actual kesef. So therefore the mitzvah of pidyon haben, even though according to the Chazon Ish and the Chassam Sofer, you could accomplish it, the mitzvah, with paper bills, but you certainly don't want to do that lechatchila because of all of these poskim who say that it's not as good as kesef. So, and therefore, in a case of a shomer who loses a stack of cash, he says he could say, I'm not going to pay for it. Ki yadua mashakasva poiskim she'ef shaliton kimli kedas hamiut kol zman she'enu das yachid mamish. Because a person can always say in a conflict where there's a financial conflict, a person could say, I paskin like those who hold that I'm exempt, provided that it's not such a singular opinion that it's the only opinion against hundreds of others. V'ayin lamaron hachida bebirkei Yosef dematzi hamuchzak loymar kimli kishnei poskim afilu neged meya poskim. There is an opinion of the chida who says that even if there's 102 opinions, 100 say you're chayiv and 2 say you're pater, you do have a right to say I go like those 2 poskim who hold that I'm pater. And that's why Choshen Mishpat halacha can be so murky, is because we're dealing with centuries and centuries of case history and of different rulings. So that's, for that reason, a lot of it will depend upon the Beis Din, and that's why a lot of times we strive for Pishara. Uvenidon didan, kevin sheyesh lapachos shlosha poskim shesovim shedin shtaros kesef kishtaros. And therefore, we would paskin that even if it's cash, we would give the shomer the right to say that yes, it's true that I should have locked the door, and yes, it's true I should have locked the envelope of cash in the drawer with the key, and I should not have left the key inside the keyhole, which is what happens so many times, right? Because out of convenience, who needs, I don't want to lose the key, so I leave it in the keyhole, right? So you put it onto the welcome ad, right? So in any event, basically the footnote is extending this psak even to cases of cash itself. So, but of course, this would mean that the employee could say, sorry, Kimli, I hold like those poskim who hold that cash is not king, and that this does not have the status of intrinsically valuable goods, and therefore I'm not going to pay. And the Beis Din would have to support his claim. However, he could lose his job. That there's still that, right?
Probably not, because the cash you would get paid is not worth anything.
Yeah, well. So therefore, going back to here, Lachain b'mikra hazeh, Kevin. Yes. What would you want to say?
Rabbi wants to finish. I was just curious about something.
Okay. Lachain b'mikra hazeh, Kevin sha'chekim en gufan mamon, afilu shehifkid sha'apakid mekabel schar lavadas v'hu nechshav shomer sachar, mikol makom hu patur migneva v'aveda kivin she'ein dinei shmira b'shtaras. And therefore, the laws of shmira do not apply to contracts, things that are not of intrinsic value. Therefore, if he loses the stack of checks, there certainly he will be patur. Go ahead.
Could you say pay half? Like, how would you find a compromise between these two?
Well, a Beis Din might want to do mediation instead of arbitration. They may want to say, listen, let's do our best to notify all the people who wrote those checks, make sure that they cancel their checks, and notify the banks, et cetera, and do whatever we can. And then then we can mitigate the loss, and then employee and employer split the difference between the two of these. That would be a way of basically trying to keep the peace and maintaining the business relationship, at least. So he says, Ela sheyesh lodin b'she'ela hazu shehapakid ma'al b'tafkido v'lo hiniach et hachekim b'kasefet ha'im haptur al hashtar shaykh gam kehashomer pasha. But he says what we should really think about in this shaila is where the pakid is where the employee really failed to do his standard job. He didn't put the checks in a vault or in the safe under lock. Would we say that the exemption over the shtaros would apply even when he was negligent? And this is where we saw in the previous tshuva, we saw a machlokas between the Rambam and the Rush as to whether acts of negligence are also covered under this exemption because it's not of intrinsic value. Hine kasav harambam dinira lo she'im pasha shomer bekarkos avodim ushtaros v'chayotze bohen chayev l'shalim. We saw the Rambam writes that acts of pshia, of really gross negligence, even in cases of real estate, of slaves, and of contracts, the shomer is going to be liable. Kevin shapasha yesh din mazik, umazik chayev l'shalim b'chol mikra, because the shomer is not just not doing his job, but he's actively a mazik. He's really done something injurious to another person by not simply just walking away from his job, right? And the Ravid disagrees with him. The Ravid, and as we saw the Rush in the previous tshuva, that there's a difference between a mazik and a person who's simply negligent. Shahaptur bishtaros hugam b'pshia. He says, and therefore, because a mazik is proactive, whereas a person who's negligent is passive. Okay, and therefore the Ravid's conclusion is that even pshia, even acts of negligence, you'll still be pater. Acheres eich rabotenu amr sheshomer chinam eno nishba al shtaros, v'lama lo amr rabotenu sheitzarach lihishava shelo pasha, elo vadai pater gam mipshia. And his argument is a very sound argument, because the rabbis say that if a guy's a shomer chinam, he's an unpaid guard, and he's watching over someone's stuff, and it gets stolen, he doesn't even have to, if what's stolen is real estate or contracts, he doesn't even have to take a shvuah. Well, according to you, the Rambam, he should have to take a shvuah that he wasn't negligent. Why doesn't he have to take the shvuah? So you see that even for acts of negligence, you're going to be pater. Umarana Shulchan Aruch hevi halacha zu b'kama makomos, and the Shulchan Aruch brings this halach in a number of places. The Hilchos halva'a kasav maran im haya shomer sacher aleihim, that if a guy is a creditor and he's holding someone's collateral, the nignavu avdu afilu b'pshia, and let's say he talks about a shomer sacher, a person who's a paid guard, and they get stolen, even through negligence, patur milashalem, he's going to be exempt for paying for stolen contracts. Avol mafsid scharo ad sheyishba sheshamar kiroi, but he's not entitled to compensation for his guardianship unless he swears that he did whatever he needed to do. V'yesh mechayvim b'pshia, and some say that if there was an act of negligence, he will be liable. Ulefi haklal sheyesh biyadenu stam v'yesh halacha v'yesh stam v'yesh halacha kistam nimsa shemar and pasak shepater v'gam harama pasak sham disvar rishon ikar debeter mafilu b'pshia. And this is basically the concluding halacha of both Rav Yosef Cairo and the Ramah, is that a shomer will be pater if he's negligent over real estate or over shtaros. V'lochein, and based on that, the conclusion is efshar l'chayev et hashomer l'shalem ala chekim. We cannot hold the shomer liable for stolen checks. Ubifrat shemaran atzmo pasak bistam shafilu impashu v'nevdu peturim. And this is especially true because the Shulchan Aruch himself paskins that even through acts of negligence, the shomer is going to be pater. V'lohevi bichlal esdas hamachayvim, and he doesn't even bring the opinion of those who say that you're chayiv. The afal pisha hashach here belachazek esdas harambam shechayv b'pshia b'dacha kol hakushyo sheikshu hamafarshim. Even though the Shach very strongly defends the position of the Rambam that when it comes to acts of negligence, the shomer is chayv even for checks, even for contracts. V'hosif de'afal pisha rov haposkim cholkem al Rambam ein holchem acharei rov haposkim b'makom shner leinaim lifsokim o amiut. And the Shach says, even though there's a majority of other poskim who go against the Rambam, but at the end of the day, if it's so clear for the Shach, it's very clear that we can never let you off the hook for negligence. But and therefore he's very strongly in the camp of the Rambam, who holds that you will be chayiv. Mikol makom halacha lemaisa efshel lechayiv et hapakid ala chekim lamrod shepasha v'lo samet chekim bakasefet. But at the end of the day, you can't hold the employee liable because he failed to put the checks in the safe. Devada yacholiton kimli ka poskim shu patur. He could say, I go like those poskim who say I'm patur. The kol shekain shekach das marna shulchan aruch shekibalnu harosav. And that's certainly true in light that the Shulchan Aruch itself paskins that way as well. Okay, so that's the end of that tshuva. Very similar to the previous tshuva. Previous tshuva was dealing with real estate damages, where the case was. Well, we saw two cases having to do with real estate. One was with the ballonim, the gas tanks, and the other one was with the solar heater on the roof, the dud shemesh. In both cases, Rav Sharaga paskins that the tenant is going to be potter, even if you could argue pshia, even if you could argue negligence. A, it may not be negligence, and B, even for negligence, the tenant can say, I paskin like the Rambam. So then we saw, well, the landlord could say, yes, but not paying for it because I paskin like the Rambam. Then the tenant can say, well, I'm going to take it out of the rent and I'll get it fixed, right? So advantage tenant, okay? And then in this case, where the employee is a paid guard and he's committed an act of negligence on contracts, and according to the Makor Baruch, even on cash itself, you would not be able to recoup that. And of course, again, it'll all boil down to what will be the future of that business relationship, right? So just give me a second and I'm going to send you, forgot to send it, the WhatsApp. There we go. I'm going to send you in the WhatsApp the next packet, which is number 12.
Based on the person taking responsibility for what they do. Like, is there any way you can? I mean,
He can't.
Maybe you can't ask them to pay the money back, but can you? I mean, they've been negligent in what they've done. They haven't followed the I'll say the rules of standard practice of how to look after these.
Correct.
So where does it lie with the fact that they've done something? How does that get transmitted?
Well, you have to talk with your employee. That would be one. That would be one thing. You either fire them or put them on probation. You let them know that I can't hold you liable financially, but it's because of you that this company has lost something of value, and I may have to let you go because of it. Yeah. I mean, right at the end of the day, I believe that would be termination with cause, but even though I can't hold you financially liable, I still have a right to terminate you because of it. Okay, so now let's go to the next packet. Okay, next tshuva. So Siman Pei Hey Dine Shmira B'Kameya. What is my level of guardianship responsibility for an amulet? That's what the word kameya means. Now, amulets were a big thing in the times of the Gemara. And there are still people today who hold of amulets and their efficacy. There was a much stronger belief in magical things in prior generations. Whether those things still hold their status is a big debate within the Jewish world. There are many people who still believe in these things. And there are many people, like the Rambam was completely against these things' efficacy. An amulet is usually a leather pouch that has parchment inside of it. And on that parchment is contained a series of letter permutations that are supposed to have a positive Kabbalistic impact on the person who wears the amulet. So if you were to open an amulet, you might see like a bunch of kufs, a bunch of shins, a bunch of olives. It wouldn't make very much sense. And then you could find some psukim. Then you might find, other permutations of letters. No. Oh, what? Well, there's all kinds of amulets. This is what a Jewish amulet is, a kameya. Yeah, we don't hold of the rabbit's foot. Yeah, especially not the ones you buy in Niagara, which are made in China. Usually was worn around the neck, yeah, with a string. Yeah. So the Mishnah in Maseches Shabbos talks about whether or not you're allowed to walk outside of your home on Shabbos, when there's no Erev, obviously, wearing an amulet. Is this considered to be carrying on Shabbos or not? Well, you can wear something where we're not afraid that you're going to take it off while you're walking, because you consider it an article of clothing. So there's a whole list of things that the Mishnah discusses. Is this considered to be an article of clothing or not? Like a brooch that a woman wears, she's allowed to walk outside with it on Shabbos. But there are other types of headdress and scarves and things like that, which are much more ambiguous as to whether you can walk outside with them. Like, for example, the Mishnah says that if you're a soldier and you have a sword, you can't walk outside with it on Shabbos because it's not considered to be an adornment. It's rather something that's used for self-defense. So obviously, if it's a time of war, it would be permissible. But if it's not a time of war, would you be allowed to wear it when there's no Eruv? And the Mishnah says you cannot. So it goes through a whole variety of things. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to walk outside on Shabbos with an amulet because it's considered to be part of your clothing. It's not something that you'd ever take off. Like how some people have a mezuzah, like a mezuzah facsimile. You ever see someone with a mezuzah necklace? Yeah, those are problematic for another halachic reason, because not really supposed to walk inside. No, that you could wear, unless does it have psukim on it? I don't think it has any psukim on it. So no, that's fine. So it would be. I said a mezuzah. A mezuzah is problematic because if it has Hashem's name in it, you're going to walk inside the bathroom with it and stuff. So that could potentially.
Not silver, nothing in it. A symbol.
I guess. Okay. But a lot, you may want to check it, because the jeweler may have figured I'll do the guy a favor. I'll put a yeah.
So you're not allowed to wear a sitter.
Yeah.
I used to go to my in-laws in Vancouver. There was no arrows. tie the sitter around my neck
Yeah,
to walk to
that
show.
doesn't work. Yeah. 1 second, they didn't have Sidurim in the shul?
They didn't have art scroll.
1 second, you took a 10-pound art scroll sitter?
Tied it around my neck. That's all.
A strange man.
What happens when you're a Baltuva? You take one wing, you fly it to another.
Yeah.
And here it is 10 years later.
Yeah.
It was Lubavitch, okay?
So here's the shot. Oh, so the thing I wanted to mention was the Rambam writes that you're allowed to walk outside with your amulet around your neck because it's considered to be an adornment that you would never take off. But he says, but it's important for you to know that it's not because these amulets have any efficacy. They're pure superstition. They mean absolutely nothing. But because people believe in them, they're not going to take them off on Shabbos, and therefore you won't be carrying. Which is a fascinating insight to the thinking of the Rambam, where, and it's a very controversial statement that he made. And it caused a number of commentaries who usually love everything the Rambam writes to really criticize him for that statement. So the Vilna Gaon, for example, writes on that statement that the Rambam makes, here the great master was swayed by the writings of Aristotle. And God forbid that we should say that amulets have no efficacy. They've been proven to provide divine protection. And so you see this great divide among the great Jewish thinkers. And these are no slouches, right? In other words, like a friend once told me, don't make fun of anyone who can turn you into a frog. You don't scoff at something that may have power that you're not aware of. So, whereas on the one hand, I'm a rationalist, and I'm not going to start wearing amulets around my neck. That's just not what I'm about, and I don't think it's appropriate for people to do it. But if someone does it, I'm not going to comment on it, because who knows, right? So here's the shaila. He says, "Yesh li kameach chashuv shenichtav al yedei mekubal mehador hakodem." I have an amulet that is a very important amulet. It was written by a makubal from a prior generation. V'hu kamea mumche shenichtav b'miyuchad avuri. It is an expert amulet, which means it's already shown its power. It was written specifically for me, meaning that the makubal who wrote the words inside the amulet custom made it just for me, and therefore what's written in there is meant to work for me only. Va'ani lokeach oto iti bimei hachol, and I take it with me wherever I go during the week. V'hinei be'erev Shabbos ha'achrona me'achar v'lo hayiti b'veiti. Last Friday, I wasn't at home. Masarti oto legisi sheyishmar alav. I gave my brother-in-law the amulet. I said, keep your eye on this. I'm going away for Shabbos. And I don't wear it on Shabbos. I just wear it during the week. But I want you to keep your eye on it. Benignav mimenu bipshia. And the amulet got stolen because my brother-in-law was negligent. It doesn't say what the negligence was. Maybe he left it on a bench or whatever it was. Ha'imu chayav l'shalim li ala kameya ki bishvili zeh shaveh harbe kesef. Is my brother-in-law, soon to be my ex-brother-in-law, right? Is he liable to pay me for this loss? For me, it has huge, huge value. Okay, so that's the shiloh. Okay, and it goes into a number of different things Does this have intrinsic value or not? What about, you know, Fifi? Well, what was the dog's name? Cookie. Cookie had tremendous value. Poor Cookie is now just a bunch of ashes. Does, you know, she's worth $25,000 to the owner, but Cookie was only worth $500. Marvin is so cruel.
You were wearing a chemo, were you?
All right, we'll continue this. Have a